carried away a little bit. But, I guess I really don't have anything to say, so if anyone has any questions, that's probably the best way to do it. Okay.
Sorry. Could you give us any more information from the quote alien Bible, the speculation stuff? Because you're the only one we know of that's had access to that information.
Sit down.
Hear more. And having read that, shit, to give us a general idea of what our situation is here right now. Are we looking at any trouble from the return? That was just the incursion at the base where there was a problem, or what's your general understanding?
Well, as far as the alien Bible, I don't know what you're really talking about. Some of the briefings that I read dealt with some of that information about being a product of genetic modification.
Right.
But that's about all. That's about all that I know. And the repercussions, the big story, all that. All that I really have no idea about.
Well, like you mentioned the date when they were supposed to return. Was something supposed to happen when they returned?
I have no idea. It was just a date, and it was a number that made no sense to me.
Oh, sorry.
601 or 30 something, obviously in a different numerical system.
So other than having created some genetic upgrades, that's it as far as that.
Supposedly, if that information is correct.
Okay. You guys duck released?
That's a pretty lengthy explanation. Well, I can give you, I guess, a brief overview of essentially how that works. If you want an in-depth description of that, you can give me your address and I can send you a paper on it. Essentially, what the reactor does is provide electrical power and the base gravity wave and amplify it. It does that by interacting matter and antimatter, essentially. The way it does that is injecting an accelerated proton into a piece of 115 that spontaneously generates anti-hydrogen, essentially. That's reacted in a small area. It's a compressed gas, probably compressed atmospheric gas, and the antimatter reacting with matter produces the energy, mainly heat energy, and that is converted into electrical energy by a thermionic generator that appears to be 100% efficient, which is a difficult concept to believe anyway. Also, the reactor has two functions. That's one of them. The other function is it provides the basic gravity wave that's amplified, and that appears at the upper sphere of the amplifier itself, and that's tapped off with a waveguide similar to microwave, and is amplified and focused, essentially. The electrical energy is transmitted essentially without wires, and I related it to almost a Tesla setup. It seemed like each subcomponent on the craft was attuned to the frequency that the reactor was operating at. So essentially the amplifiers themselves received the electrical energy like a Tesla coil transmits power to a fluorescent tube. What was the rest of the question?
Yeah, in other words, what is the electric field? I think that's basically the answer.
Yeah, that's how the amplifiers receive the power through the waveguide to receive the basic wave. It's very, very similar to a microwave amplifier. And, for more technical description, I can send you drawings or things along those lines, but that's basically how it works.
Can you stick with some 115 home with you to do some testing?
I obtained it, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the video, mostly videotape and things like that.
John said it was stolen. Last night he said they're stolen back.
Well, there's another level to that, but like I said, right now it's in private hands.
John said last night that he's allergic to something. How does that go?
Well, it really depends on the energy level. The more energy you expend, the greater consumption of fuel, just like any modern machine. So, Really all depends on the amount of energy you request.
What is Dr. Keller's relationship as for? Do you think he might be working on antimatter weaponry?
I don't know, but he was certainly, I forgot what his exact title was. He was chief consultant or something along those lines. And as far as antimatter weaponry, I don't think anyone was involved in that. There was certainly some beam weapon work, and Teller's been involved with that. I think his last project at Livermore, Los Alamos was, I think he called it Super Excalibur, and that was essentially a nuclear bomb detonated in orbit and fiber optic light guides that directed X-rays to incoming warheads. And that's his pet project. He loves that thing, so I don't think he jumped to antimatter weapons. All the way in the back there.
What, under your sports model that you worked on, what do you think was on level 3, and where were the bathrooms?
I don't know if anything was on level, well, I don't know if there were any bathrooms. On level 3, I can only guess, and I would imagine that there was some sort of navigational equipment or their version of a computer or something along those lines, because I saw nothing else that controlled the amplifiers, the directions they pointed in.
Bob, how do you perceive mankind can develop this type of machine?
I really don't. I really don't, without access to certain materials. Or maybe new manufacturing techniques that can produce those, but until those problems are solved, the fact that we even know how to deal with it or even duplicate it, is pretty useless.
How many other materials might be necessary besides those that you know of?
That might be it. The rest of it might be just essentially polishing up manufacturing things, making things smaller, just general increase in technology, getting a small accelerator running at a higher energy level. I don't know about the metallurgy aspect of the craft. I don't think any exotic metals are necessary, though they may be employed. I imagine you could make a craft out of aluminum if necessary, but what part that plays, I don't know. Not any resonance, but it's important most of the edges on the craft around it, because the high voltage field does appear at most of the craft, except for the last upper bump. There's a little ring before that. Now I'm only talking about one craft, so I don't know about the rest. But there's a small ring before that, a darker black one, and that's an insulator ring, and that's the only place above that upper section, the third level, is where high voltage does not appear.
Any technology that came from the aliens resemble anything that we can do today? Will we advance any degree that they are?
Well, there are some basic things. The fact that they're using a little accelerator, a little smaller, we have things like that, if that's what you're getting at.
Anything really advanced?
Yeah, other than the fact of just the way the craft operates, by manipulating gravity, that's about it, really.
Well, let me ask you something about metalwork. What you observed in terms of the structure, the skin of it, thickness, because there were reports from Roswell and otherwhere that there was a very thin type of metal skin that was really undamageable and so on. What was this?
Well, I called it metal, and I really can't say that's what it was. I called it metal because I slid my hand across it, and it was cold, and it was lustrous, so.
Do you notice any place like, on the edge or something where it may have been a lot thinner than your standard relatively aluminum in the craft?
It's hard, from the outside you can't tell. When you walk in, the way the archways are inside, they're probably about 4 inches thick anyway, so you really can't tell how thin the skin is itself, or if it's exotic or right.
Yes, we're on this home at 115, and your potentially could be made here on Earth. What if you found the right bombardment speed, the right target shape, and the right containment?
Well, I imagine with enough time you can make a small amount of it. I mean, my analogy is look at how long it takes to make gold in an accelerator from bismuth or something like that.
That may just be a technology that hasn't advanced.
Right, but the bottom line is you have to sit there and plug in protons and neutrons, for that matter, into an existing atom, and you have to do it, essentially on an individual basis, and they're not all going to catch on. Some are going to
How did they got their information?
I think it was naturally occurring somewhere, just because it's stable. Yeah, probably so. That's just a guess on my part, but you know, if that technology was harnessed quick enough, chances are they didn't have, you know, when they came here, our levels of technology were probably fairly new to them. They probably never even considered an internal combustion engine, or for that matter, you know, when they came flying into the atmosphere and saw little cigar-shaped things with fire come out the back, they probably couldn't conceive of how they were powered. So it was, you know, it just all depends how, you know, what materials, what raw materials you have. But, you know, that's just an opinion that was a naturally occurring element.
Are you aware of any long-distance flight tests that have been done on any of this?
As of the time that I was there, I was told that they really didn't take them any great distance at all, other than right outside that.
Have you heard the rumor of the concept of
No.
If we had a working agreement with the aliens at one time, why didn't they give us a user's manual for these ships, and why have we had to work so hard back engineering them?
I haven't the slightest idea. Yeah, you
Is
can,
this because of all of any of the technology learning it?
I really don't know. You know,
The manual-
it almost seems like there had to have been some assistance or some information found, but who knows?
Your information didn't indicate that, though.
No.
Yeah, with such tight security around there, and supposedly only 500 pounds of this material, how is it somebody could get some of it out of there?
Because some of the, not some of the material is, that they have there is essentially raw. The material is, it has to be machined into discs. These discs have to be stacked up and then cut into a cone shape and then sliced along the long axis of it. That work is done at Los Alamos. I'm not exactly sure Los Alamos knows what they're doing. Apparently they think that they're developing, the little coins they're working on is some new type of armor. And having worked at Los Alamos and know people around that area, that's how I obtained some of it.
Can you say anything about Project Looking Glass and the relationship between gravity and time?
Well, gravity and time are almost essentially the same thing. And Looking Glass dealt with using gravity essentially to distort time, and as I've said before, I really know very little about that, but you know, they're only talking about milliseconds or even less microseconds of time distortion. They're not like looking back in time to see who killed Kennedy or something.
The craft that are you talking about, the scout craft, is that the one that's like the Adamski picture with the 3 domes underneath? And if it's not,
I'm not exactly sure what the Adamski.
okay, it says the saucer shape. It has
This is
three
the
balls
one
underneath.
that looks like one of the Meyer craft.
Billy Meyer craft.
Did you see any others than that one, or is there 9 out there?
Yeah, I saw 9 total, but that's the only one I got close enough to.
Do you see the one with the 3 domes underneath that, 3 balls underneath that has a central housing underneath? And
No.
then the second question was, did anybody give any indication as to who was driving or any information on them?
I assumed that it was humans that were piloting the craft, though it could have been remote control, but at the one test flight that I saw on the ground, they were in radio communication with someone, and I assumed it was someone in the craft. I imagine it's possible that it could have been a remote observer somewhere, but I just assumed that the seats were retrofitted, or they were sitting on the floor for that matter.
Are you familiar with, I have a couple aspects of the question. Are you familiar with Howard Menger's electrocraft and Otis Carr's saucer design, and how are their devices, how do they generate their gravity fields and compared with what you described? And lastly, can you speculate how why the commercialization of some of these crafts has been possible with so many different patents applied for these kinds of design crafts?
Because they don't work.
Are there any defects encountered
No.
by the pilots inside the craft?
No.
From your interviews, you seem to feel that the Area 51 or the S4 test site was kind of slipshod in how it does its research. It really doesn't have the facilities there to actually do the research correctly. And also, I'm wondering, could you comment about that? And also, I'm wondering what you could tell us about the other types of ships you saw there that you thought were alien in origin.
Well, as far as the research at S4, that was kind of slipshod. Just because mainly it was being done from a military point of view. If anything, it was a weapons development program, and they were more concerned about with duplicating the technology, not really duplicating the technology, duplicating the hardware, as opposed to back engineering the technology to find out, you know, how these theories actually work and you know, what's going on with them. And so they really weren't taking the scientific approach, and that was causing some dissension. I don't remember the second part of the question.
Just what other types of ships did you see that might have been alien in origin?
I only saw them, and they varied in shape. I was told they had the same identical power and propulsion system, and that's the extent of my knowledge on that.
What about shape?
They varied completely in shape.
Yeah, on the, you had the military out there supposedly working with the aliens. Did you ever get an inference from them that it was a positive or a negative situation? In other words, when they brought up, when they were talking about the aliens or whatever, was it a positive or a negative type slant on that?
Well, they really didn't talk about the aliens. The only time I ever heard anybody mention anything about an alien, someone, and I'm just assuming that, someone called it, or called the thing, a gourd. And that was it. I heard it in the middle of a conversation, and they stopped talking when I got up to them, so that was the thing.
Just a question to the interior of the fourth mount. I know you have a reference to the power source in the center of the craft, and there were small seats that were low to the ground. How about consoles or displays or any kind of instrumentation?
Nothing along those lines, but what I call the console, there are 3 seats. If you look at the bottom level, there's 3 amplifiers in a triad formation. Directly above each one is something I call a console, and I think that's a secondary part to the amplifier. And an analogy to that would be the actual amplifier, and the thing hanging underneath would kind of be a speaker if you're talking on audio terms. So.
Is there any kind of control or lights or indicators?
No.
Or anything like that? No on switch?
not that I could find.
Yeah. Did it seem like there was any place or even a need for a light support of any kind on this thing?
Not that it was obvious to me.
2 questions. How do they navigate, and how do we converse with them?
I haven't the slightest idea how they navigate. You know, like I said, I think if that, whatever controls the configuration of the amplifier is the focusing, which is basically their navigation, is most probably on the upper level of the craft that I didn't get to look at. And as far as the conversation between them, your guess is as good as mine. No. The local means of propulsion is essentially them balancing on an out-of-phase gravity wave. And it's not as stable as you would think. When the craft took off, it wobbled to some degree. It's, I mean, a modern-day Hawker Harrier or something along those lines, a vertical takeoff craft is much more stable than them in the Omicron configuration, which is that mode of travel. The Delta configuration is where they use the 3 amplifiers. And those are the only 2 methods I know about for moving a craft.
Can one pilot, as far as you know, pilot this craft, or does it take 3, or do you know anything about that?
I don't know. I'll get back in the red.
Element 15, was that stable? In other words, does it give off a radiation, or could you hold it in your hand?
No, it's stable.
Stable, so you can hold it right in your hand?
Yeah, theoretically, elements should reach a stability around anywhere from 113 to 116, somewhere in there, and apparently that's true. And again, they should reach a stability somewhere up around 220 some odd. But you know, whether those elements will ever be synthesized or found naturally.
But for its size, it was really heavy, extremely heavy.
Yeah, it's unusually heavy. Yeah.
Okay.
Do I think we have bases? No. The monuments of Mars are interesting. That's about the most I can say. They're suspicious, and I really don't know until there's more information. You know, I've seen pictures of them and things along those lines, but the most recent Mars probe is taking low-altitude photographs of those, so I guess everyone will know in about a year.
All right, Bob, are you still having contact with Los Alamos as far as your work goes?
Indirectly, yeah.
What about your perception of time and length, width and height? Is it the same aboard the craft as all of it? Why are you on board is the way you want?
While you're on board or off of it? Well, as long as you're on the craft, everything seems completely normal. Time flows at a normal rate, and if you're off the craft and you're comparing the time of someone in the craft and off the craft, there'll be a definite difference there. Anything where gravity is involved. Even the shuttle astronauts, they'll come back just because of the difference in gravity. When they come back, there'll be a slight difference in time.
Did you learn of any other well-known civilian scientists
Yes, not involved in this, but involved in the gravity work. And he's at Los Alamos, and we've had a little bit of contact. I'd rather not, just because so far no one's bothering him, and I'm sure he wants to keep it that way.
You said that the skin on the craft would become transparent. You said the wall inside the craft would become transparent.
Only one place, yeah.
Only one, the whole craft can become transparent?
No, there's only one place where the seats faced, and it, there again, I said that's advanced technology, but it's not that advanced because, we have something along the lines of that liquid crystal that we could, make transparent and also use as, a display of sorts. So that's, but this was metallic, and we haven't anything along the lines of the toughness of metal that you could drill into that can become transparent.
And what was the time period when the wall became transparent and you saw the symbols of Eero?
Probably about 30 seconds or so.
Yeah, two related questions. Are you aware of any instances where the inside of an alien craft is much larger than its apparent outside?
No, I've heard stories like that though, but I haven't.
The other thing is the strong force that you've identified with gravity A. I know there's been some recent theories that propose actually an 11-dimensional universe with 7 of them rolled up.
I'm not buying that.
Does it operate on any principle related to that?
Yeah, my main problem with that, and Stephen Hawking for that matter, is that once you start creating other dimensions, it's like an excuse. I mean, in particle physics, they do that too. When they can't figure out something, they say, well, we don't know what gravity is. Well, it's caused by the graviton. Yeah, they make up particles like that. You can do that with dimensions too. Where they go, I want to do another dimension. Yeah, it's like an excuse. The bottom line is, as everyone has said, every physicist has said, the answer to everything is always simple. And there's not an 11-dimensional universe. It does, first of all, there doesn't need to be, because all this technology works, one-dimensional, essentially a 4-dimensional universe, and there's no need for it.
Yes, I have 2 or 3 questions, please. You said in your videotape that you do the work from Las Vegas to Groom Lake, is that right?
Yeah.
How did you get from Groom Lake down to Papoose Lake?
In a bus.
There's a facility on the other side of Groom Lake, on the east side of Groom Lake. Are you familiar with that?
On the east side of Groom Lake? Across the lake?
Yes.
No, I've never been over there.
Did they ever tell you, did you get anything of the work that was done on the west side of Groom Lake?
No. Well, by the fact that the screen became transparent and other things were operational, I can assume that there was some power generated. So.
How long were you part of the export project, and how key of a person were you on science before you're going to get flipped?
I was probably there only 6 months, 4 months, something like that. It's hard to remember. And as far as the key person, I'm sure I was the last rung on the ladder. Though, because no one has really gotten anywhere, they were looking to me for fresh ideas, which I really didn't have anything because I didn't know, really what was going on or where they had been. So it was a very disorganized group, and that's really all I can relay. I don't know how else to describe it. Very frustrating.
Element 115, does it have mission lines?
Does it have emission lines?
Spectral.
Well, I imagine it does. Every other element does, yeah.
That you know of?
Well, no, I haven't seen, any spectrographic analysis on it. Well, actually, they did do it. I don't know if I saw it, though. I saw a neutron bombardment test and density measurements and things like that, but I'm sure they carried out that test on it, but I wouldn't be able to identify the lines. No.
You're not aware of the results?
They probably showed them to me, but I can't, for the life of me, remember after 3 years. possibly in heavier stars or in planets that surround a larger star system. And in fact, some people brought up that that's ridiculous because all the elements that we know of are found on Earth, and that's not true. I think it's technium, something along those lines. It's not found on Earth. It's on the periodic chart. So
There's something going on outside.
I don't know. I mean, no matter what, uranium is certainly a valuable element. I don't know.
Did you ever see any aliens at all?
No. The Belly Minor movies. I don't think I've ever seen any motion. Oh wait, I did see that. Yeah, I did see that. What's strange about the Billy Meyer photographs, that the discs that one of the ones he took a picture of looked exactly like the one that I looked on, but yeah, I'm certainly not an expert in the field, but some of those look unbelievably fake. And I can't, especially the thing that was flying around the tree. I mean, boy, it looks like it's hanging from a string, but but why would he do that if he had some authentic pictures? And I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it.
Do you have an opinion of this comet, what happened
I really don't have an opinion. I just, repeat it. Boy, I don't know.
Bob, any weapons on these ships?
Yeah, apparently there's one, but I was involved in the project that dealt with it.
And what's your next video going to cover?
Well, it's really not a next video. There's the video that I made is being redone by another company only because they liked it so much, and they're just redoing the graphics and making it a little more technical, and I'm just serving as a technical advisor on it. But for the most part, it's 60 to 70% of it's the identical thing. They just wanted to do it because these particular group of guys involved, I think a company's called DreamQuest, involved in special effects, were really into the UFO thing, and they wanted to do it with modern day stuff instead of knit stockings and things like that.
There's no indication on these ships that when one of our jets would approach them, they would neutralize the computer system or electrical system?
Well, it's certainly possible. I don't have any information on that, but just by the EMP generated, by the systems on the craft, that makes perfect sense to me.
I was going to ask you, what kind of weapon do they have?
It's some sort of directed energy weapon, and I think it's a particle weapon, probably a neutron.
How many levels does that S4 have?
There might be two, but I know there's one because obviously I was on one. But I can't actually remember if there's any direct mention from there of there being a lower level. But I really wasn't allowed to roam freely around the whole place, so I don't know.
Bob, could you tell us about your education? I've heard a couple of different conflicting things I'd like to hear from you.
That varies widely. As far as electronic technology, my degree there is from Caltech, and physics is from MIT.
Did you go to Pierce College?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, let's just
Where did you hear that?
A friend said something that somebody I don't even know. I just thought, well, something I want to ask because it cleared my mind.
Yeah, I went to Pierce and Northridge, and then I'm going on terrible dates. I don't remember what date I was at Pierce. Probably like in '76 or something. I was at Pierce, and then '77 or '8. I went to Northridge just for a short time for some classes, then I was at Caltech, and then MIT after that.
Yeah, some critics have suggested that there is not a Department of Naval Intelligence as shown on your IRS record. I wonder if you could address that.
Yeah, I've heard people say that before, but the bottom line is if you, and I've let other people check into that. Bob Exler is a guy that managed to trace that down through the IRS, and if you write the zip code number on the bottom of it, or NC-101 or something like that, or NC something anyway, it gets to somewhere in the Navy. You know, as far as if there's a department there, I don't know, but you know, that's the W-2 that I got sent. So.
Well, that same person was saying the zip code that was on there was someone that was in reserve, unused.
That was unused?
Yeah.
Well, no, he had correspondence with someone in the Navy through that address.
I'm not talking about Bob Exler.
Oh, Bill Moore, I don't know. Bill Moore.
No, he's the nickname himself.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he disputes everything I said. He said, well, there's two different types on here and this and that. I said, well, you know, I don't know. So, you know, that's basically what I get sent, and you know, I've seen enough information where that zip code works, and that's all the information I have. I really haven't pursued it myself. Oh, because of the amount of money. Yeah, no one would know the amount of money except me, and the people that, you know, so that's all the information I've got.
I have two questions. They're not related to each other. One is, are they silent or noiseless? And B, who signed your paychecks?
As far as are they silent or noiseless, there's a slight hiss before they take off, and up to a certain altitude. And that sounds like a high voltage hiss of sorts. That's all the sounds that I've heard. I've heard lots of reports about, you know, weird flying saucer type sounds, but you know, I've never encountered that. Who signed my paycheck? There was a signature on it, but I don't know, you know, whose it was. It never, you know, the time that I cashed the paycheck, I've never even concerned me tracing anything down.
So there wasn't a company name up in the corner?
Well, when I worked for the federal government years ago, all you
No, it said that,
is a green treasury check. There'd be no other papers with it from the Department of Treasury.
No, this said the Department of Naval Intelligence on it.
On the check?
Yeah, on the check.
Thank you. Bob, if a craft like that comes into our atmosphere, would you expect a loud report that might get explained?
Well, it's solely dependent on the velocity that it enters. So, if you're dealing with something that manipulates gravity, it doesn't have to slingshot into the earth. You can come in at a low speed, not heat up, not really encounter
But it's
any.
velocity to point, is that so?
Right. Well, yeah, if you're traveling at supersonic, then you get a report. If you're not, you don't. You know, it's pretty straightforward.
When you were at S4, to your knowledge, what was the approximate percentage of civilian versus military personnel, and in what kind of job categories?
The civilian personnel were scientific in nature, and the military personnel were only security. And as far as the percentage, it was a small percentage of scientific to military personnel.
Weren't there any secretaries?
I'm sure there were offices all over the place, but when I came into the facility, I was essentially escorted right to where I work and worked there, other than the few amount of times that I got to walk into the hangar and under an escort too. And when I left, it was the same. So like I said, there might be offices, there might be bunkers in there might be underground levels, there might be an alien nest in there. I have no idea.
Did you have to bring your own food, or was there a cafeteria?
Excuse me?
How did you eat? How did you eat?
The only place I ever ate was out of Area 51. So if there was a cafeteria there, I never got to eat in it.
You come and go with other people?
I usually came with Dennis Mariani, who was my supervisor. Now, I wasn't on a full-time swing, essentially. I flew in usually between 4 and 5 o'clock at night and left by 11. So I was only there for a short time each day. Very few. Me and Dennis and usually, well, or actually not usually, occasionally one other person. I don't think I ever saw Barry on the bus.
Is there a chance that any of the workers might defect?
Barry would. That's why I spent some time trying to get hold of him, and there was actually some time after all this hit the news and the whole thing went down, we got a call from Dennis, my supervisor, and he arranged a meeting at the Union Plaza Hotel. And when we got there, I brought 3 people with me, and I think he said he'd be in the casino area somewhere, and we went, I think Gene Huff came with me, and we went into the area and walking down the corridor, I recognized one of the security personnel from there. And then when I finally found Dennis, he didn't even acknowledge my presence. We couldn't get his attention, and I left. So apparently, someone had known of the conversation and sent someone down there and made themselves obvious to Dennis, or something happened and we left. But I think that was where Dennis really wanted to say something.
I understand that you use hypnotic regression to get some of the details of your experience. If so, what is your impression of hypnotic regression?
It's probably reasonable because there were specifics. They contend that you can sit there and reread a document as if you had, as if you were there reading it for the first time. And what I was mainly interested in was in some of the schematics and drawings. And I did some of the hypnosis stuff with Lane Keck, the hypnotherapist in town, and I was certainly able to redraw a lot of the schematics and engineering drawings along those lines. And it's so as far as using it as a tool for that seems to work. For anything else,
First of all, when I was 12 years old, I saw a daylight flying disc, which looked exactly like one of the Myers photographs 15 years later. And,
you mean earlier?
earlier, 50 years earlier, I saw this disc. Billy Myers took a photo of it. Exactly the same thing. I saw.
Nope.
That was the best disc. He said, organized, but the lot artist.
No, it was a master's degree. What was the year of graduation? Probably 82, because I think I left there and went to Los Alamos.
When you decided to leave, also the threats.
What mind control with that?
Someone made the comment that that you might have been a victim of some sort of mind control, or
That came about by, when I was first brought there, they had a doctor, or nurse actually, in a little medical setup there, and right after I had signed all the release papers, and my first time out there, I went in and they did what I perceived to be an allergen test, because they put a grid on my arm and different, pricking with different chemicals, and it was their contention that, well, boy, there's a lot of strange elements here and unusual things you'd be working on, so they're trying to see if you're going to have any adverse reaction to them. And I was given something to drink. I said it smelled like pine, which it did. That's the best way I can describe it. And a lot of people jumped on that saying, aha, well, that's the mind control substance. When you leave work, you're going to forget everything. When you come back, you remember everything. But I think if anything, it was an anti-allergen drug or something along those lines.
how about the threats? Are there any kind of threats being used?
Yeah, there's plenty of threats.
Well, I mean, can you be specific, like bodily harm, or the loss of pension, or what kind of stuff was?
Well, the loss of pension and jail time, that was part of signing the paperwork. As far as bodily harm, after they caught us the time I brought out John Lear and a couple other people up there, then they threatened me, and they really didn't get much reaction out of that. Then they threatened my wife at the time, and they really threw out everything they could without physically attacking me.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Once they knew it was really you, not Dennis or someone else or anything, why didn't they just arrest you under charges of violating the law?
Well, they can't arrest me because they'd have to admit, that this is classified material, and they'd have to release it. Why did they, kill me? That I really don't know. Maybe that had to do with how I got the job, or referencing the connection to Ed Teller or something along those lines. But I don't know.
Were there any contractor names, departments, divisions that were mentioned, or signs on the wall, or anything like that, referring to any companies or anything like that?
No, but I know EG&G had nothing to do with it. That's the only light I can shed on that, because I had mentioned that to him once, because that's where I was interviewed, at the EG&G building, and I thought that it was part of the EG&G project, and I think it was Dennis who said that, we don't let those people, anywhere near this place, or any, they were just a sore thumb to him.
Well,
As one way of getting this information out, at the same time that everyone stop harassing them, have you ever considered bringing them to court?
On what charge?
Threatening your own family, harassing you, and as a result of that, forcing them to...
With what evidence would I do that? I mean, it's hard enough to prove it to, the layman in general, but taking it to court, it's impossible. I mean, there's plenty of people that don't believe me anyway.
So you never sought legal counsel with regard to any of those?
Well, a little, but yeah, initially. And, the bottom line is, the attorney said there's absolutely nothing to go on. It's a total waste of time. And, if anything, it's going to be a public forum to discredit me in some manner. So, why even go through with it?
What about class action in ACLU?
But still, you need, some sort of evidence that this happened. Even if I pulled out a piece of 115 and said, here, well, what does that have to do with anything, And there's nothing that... and what did they do to violate my rights that I didn't agree to at the beginning? So they really had their bases covered.
Pretty dirty what they did to you in Las Vegas there in 1990 in the summer. That was pretty dirty.
What was that?
It's a beautiful.
Well, yeah, that was my own fault.
So you've been through your counseling.
Yeah.
By saying that, right?
How would someone get a piece of paper explaining the physical properties used in this mode of transportation?
The physical properties.
Or I mean the formulas used in the Grevy 8. Kind of an explanation for.
Well, if you want to give me your name and address, I've got a couple of things I wrote up that just basically covers some of the. It's a more technical description of exactly what's going on that you really can't explain without drawing.
Is there such a place as area in 99?
I've never heard of it.
Do you feel you're being watched currently? Do you have any interaction with security?
It's strange you should mention that. There has been nothing for probably these 4 years or 3 years, whatever it's been, but the other day, one of my phone lines has not been working and the other one was breaking up, so I called Centel down and they checked the house out, said there's nothing in the wiring here, and they called me down from Charleston Boulevard from the telephone pole, and they said my individual line was cut, and at the other one, the other wires were stripped and twist-tied together. So, of course, me being paranoid thinks, well, someone tapped in there, but I really can't think of another excuse as me being, it's just my single line being played with. But that's what he said, and they filed a report on that, so that's one form of documentation.
You say your records at Caltech and MIT have somehow disappeared.
And Los Alamos and really everywhere else.
Is there any way you could reconstruct your coursework and professors?
Oh, sure. I've got people that that I went to school with, and George Knapp has spoken to some of them, and even flew with me up to Los Alamos and spoke to my colleagues there, and it's just.
Could you reveal some of the professors at MIT and Caltech?
Yeah, if you want. I don't have a list of them here. Dr. Duxler, I think, was one of them, and Hosefield was another. Hosefield. Hohsfield or something along those lines.
Would they remember you?
Oh yeah, Hosefield I know well.
These are at MIT or Caltech?
Hosefield was at MIT. Duxler was at Caltech.
Yeah, who's Barry?
Barry's a guy I worked with. Essentially worked on a buddy system there, and someone you have ideas to bounce off of, and Barry Castillo or Castile.
Was he there before you, or
yeah, long
still
time.
there, or is he
probably still there?
Did you get any information from him?
Well, he essentially taught me everything that they had done up to date.
In the course of your work, did they ever mention any other facilities, installations on the country where associated work was being done?
No, they did mention, though, that this was the place that all of this stuff was brought to, and it was really purposely condensed here to keep an eye on everything and to have immediate access to everything that dealt with this, the alien technology.
Regarding the craft, the alien craft, were there any test personnel that crashed them? If so, do you know about what the causes were?
I didn't read about any crashes during tests at all. But you'd think that there would be some, but I didn't.
When you were at Caltech, were you affiliated with any of the student houses?
No.
When I first heard of S4, it reminded me a lot of disk testing that I've heard of that goes on in Australia at Pine Gap. And I was wondering if you know anything about Pine Gap. Did you read anything about Pine Gap that you could tell us about?
I really don't keep abreast of the UFO information. As far as officially, I never read anything. I've heard the name Pine Gap mentioned, but I haven't heard anything about that.
Has anybody ever approached you with a screenplay offer?
Oh, God, yeah. Constantly.
Constantly? You ever consider it?
Yeah. The main problem, Columbia Pictures last year really wanted to do it, and they said we're making a screenplay, and my only problem is that if you guys are going to make a movie, it has to be exactly what happened, and not the Hollywood version. I don't want to see Steven Seagal in it or anything.
I don't know too much about your experiential background or your expertise, but do you have any speculation why they recruited someone with a master's instead of a PhD?
No, that's a really good question. I've always said there's plenty more people qualified than I am, and if there's any there's only two reasons they could have. Is either number one was that Dr. Teller essentially juiced me into the position and said, there's a guy, Bob Lazar, I know I'm find a place for him, or that the fact that I have traditionally approached everything from a very strange angle and essentially off the beaten path and tackling technical problems. And, so it's only one of those two reasons. Unless there's a third one that I have no idea about.
Two things. Do you think they'll ever release this information? And if they don't, how do you think it'll ever come out? Besides people like, or will it be something like what you're doing?
Well, hopefully it's not this way. Hopefully there's going to be a release of information eventually, but whether or not they're going to say, hey, we've been keeping this secret for so long, it almost seems to me that they need a staged incident to get him off the hook. Take a flying saucer up in a C-130 and push it out the back and say, look at the crash.
How would they overcome the G-forces and the rapid change of direction?
They don't apply once you've distorted. Distorting gravity, essentially having a gravity amplifier, distorts time and space, and those really don't apply. There's no interaction.
So there would be no effect on humans either?
No, there's no effect inside at all.
Bob, you're working on the S4 project. Did your education and whatever scientific vision permit you to believe that at some point you gave a meaningful contribution to the program? And if so, after how much time approximately?
I was always in serious doubt whether or not they were going to get rid of me because there really wasn't anything that I could contribute. I wasn't an expert in any particular field that they were dealing with. So, I made some contributions as far as determining what element they were dealing with was, but yeah, to some degree.
I was just wondering, when you worked at MIT and Caltech, I forgot if you had a master's degree or doctorate or whatever, but did you come from a pretty, was your education pretty traditionally grounded as far as your own views, as far as physics and what is considered common knowledge, as opposed to theoretical things? And in other words, how surprised were you when they started showing you all this hardware and these concepts that could do things that was really...
Oh, very. I was...
How long did it take you to start grasping that you could really...
Even when I was reading the documentation, the alien question really never entered my mind. I kept pushing it off to, all this group of scientists secretly came up with. I just had a mental block against that because I always thought flying saucers were totally ridiculous, and the people that really paid attention to such phenomena were just out in left field really long.
Thanks, Bob.
But it really made very little sense to me that anyone would deal with something like that. So I really held out to the very end, and until I finally said, "Well, Bob," so that was it.
Well, at S4, did you ever hear any Air Force or military squadron numbers or names hanging about?
Yeah, I probably did, but I can't remember. I do remember someone talking about something along those lines. I don't think they were pilots, but they were someone related to the Air Force. I don't remember who, or they were talking about the Air Force, and I think they mentioned a squadron. And I don't know if that was what they called the group that flew the craft, or it was someone else, at Groom Lake. I really don't know.
Are any nicknames or anything like that?
No, there really wasn't much, idle banter going on.
As far as like the gravitational field, these crafts and so forth, if you were to amplify it enough, could you enlarge the area that you wanted to take? In other words, could you move more than just the craft itself, say 2 craft under the same power source and so forth? or even, even ever consider something like that?
It's possible, as long as they were both essentially in the field that was being emitted. I really don't know what, how the level of energy relates to the amount of mass that can be bent that way, or how the amount of space that can, those numbers I really don't have, so it's just a guess.
Do you think it would be feasible?
What kind of control
Probably.
systems? What kind of control or instrument systems did they have?
I really don't know. That anything that I assume was control systems or instrumentation was up above, and I think that's where the navigation computation took place. And I dealt with only the power-hungry components essentially.
When you were at S4, was there ever either a period within a day or even a couple of days where you, at this point, don't remember what you were doing during that time? And was there ever a period of time that you're not able to account for?
Yeah, I said that, and again, that's been taken and bent a lot of different ways too. There were times that I left, and it's because so much stuff I was exposed to, I was essentially drowned in information, and when I got back home, I really couldn't remember what day anything happened. But did I forget big chunks of knowledge? No, I just...
No, but there like periods of days where you haven't recalled what happened during those days? I mean, you were able to recall. And second, you probably want to get into this, but I'd really appreciate it if you would. When you were walking either by the hallway or down, whatever, by the door with the window in it, and you look through, can you go into that and describe what you did see? I mean, even if you're not sure, say, just state it as exactly as it was.
Well, this has to be taken in the right context, too. First of all, being surrounded by the, flying saucers, knowing that the alien thing exists and all this technology. When I was walking down a hall to the, I don't remember where I was going anymore, but the different doors to the hangars are small 9-inch square windows with wire mesh running through them, and I looked in one as I walked by and was told to keep my head forward, and I saw the backs of two guys, and they were talking to a child, or I thought it was a small child, and of course when I told that to John Larry, he said, that was an alien, Bob, there's no doubt. And I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was a small guy, but it just looked weird and it was a glance, so, do I think it was an alien? No.
Did you see the quote, small guy? Did you see the small guy, or you only saw the two guys looking downwards?
No, I saw the small guy.
You saw the small guy that they were talking to?
Yeah.
What did it look
Well,
like?
it was just a glance. I have no idea. That's why I said, believe me, if it had a rounded head and big eyes, I'd say, hey, there's an alien there, but I can't say that.
But it was a small,
It was
a small person or someone they were talking
Yeah.
to.
See, I don't think anyone could bring their kids down there, so I don't know. But, for that matter, they could have been holding up
I realize you're talking to a crowd that doesn't have a lot of personal experience, a lot of these people.
Right, but also look at it from a technical viewpoint, that it could be a model, a life-size model, and they're trying to see how the size relationship works in the seats and other parts of the craft, and what's accessible, so it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a living.
Actually shows the person.
Would you mind speaking at all about how this body of knowledge has affected you emotionally or maybe spiritually? Are you frightened by the implications of what all this means? Or
No.
You've no doubt thought about the overall agenda, speculated, I'm sure.
Yeah, but it's difficult to really, put a finger on it, since there's so little evidence to go, and really 99% of the stuff that I hear, I really don't even come close to believing at all. And it's not just because I'm skeptical, it's because it's absolutely ridiculous. I even, though it's stepping on a lot of people's toes, I think 99% of the sightings out here are absolutely not flying saucers. Most people are watching 737s come into Groom Lake, and they turn up there, and there's lights on the planes. And along the other same lines, there's these parachuted flares that they fire off near the Papoose Lake area, and they're in orange color, which is pretty coincidental, and they're on essentially a modified small hot air balloon, so the burning heat of the flare keeps it afloat longer. And whether they're doing that for disinformation or practicing how missiles lock onto heat-seeking targets, I don't know, but I think 99% of that stuff is what people that come around this area are saying.
It seems as if even knowing that we possess alien technology hasn't made you a believer.
That's probably true. But it has. I believe the stuff that I worked on, there's absolutely no question in my mind. But I think everyone can only go so far, and I can't I just hate to speculate because I hate to be wrong. I don't want to say, well, they had to be given to us because we didn't shoot them down, and it's so I just stop right there.
I think we forget sometimes you're a science.
Maybe so. I stop with what I'm pretty sure with, and that's it.
What is your synopsis in a nutshell? Based upon what you saw and what you experienced.
Well, I can't. Like I said, I stopped before that. I have lots of possible ideas in my mind, but
Based only on what your experience was, only on what you saw, what is your synopsis?
my synopsis of what I know to be true,
Yes.
that the government is holding 9 alien spacecraft that are propelled by a modified gravity generator. Work is being conducted 15 miles south of Groom Lake at that isolated area only, designated as S4, that at least one of those crafts operate, and that's about it.
Okay, thank you.
What did your work environment smell like? Were there any unusual odors from the plant or anywhere else?
No, none at all. That's a good question. Did I ever see S4?
What was it?
What was the question? The question is, did you ever see S4 written anywhere?
On your bed.
Yeah, the S4 was punched out on the badge, but I was more along the lines of I was thinking it was a sign, and I think, because it's hard to see, I think near, when you approach the Papoose mountain range, that there is a sign that designates it as S4, but if I'm pretty sure I saw a sign there because I can only see out the front window when I'm going through there, and I'm really not sure what it said, but since most other signs designated it's an area or a tech area or something along those lines, that might have been S4 if that's what you're referring to. Well, yeah, and as someone else mentioned on the badge, it was star punched out there. But as far as an actual sign to the area, I didn't see it in any other writing. Well, that's it. It really says it directly above it. I mean, the star punch.
Oh, how was it written?
Yes. S-4. Yeah.
Phil Morseman, how do you write it? How do you write it?
Does it make a difference?
Right.
We can't hear the questions.
Yeah.
Well, I know there's a lot of people that don't believe the story, altogether, but it's difficult. There's really a limit to what else could I possibly do, to show people what happened, other than relaying some of the information and things along those lines.
What kind of work are you doing now?
A variety of things. I mean, everything from I have 3 separate companies. One is deals with commercial photo processing. The other one is developing and repairing alpha radiation detectors for radiation off of plutonium, which unfortunately that's going down the tubes because they stopped the testing out here. And I do computer graphics, a lot of that, and actually music videos, believe it or not.
Are you still building and racing jet cars?
Well, I don't do it for money anymore. Now I just take the jet car out and run it around. But I kind of got scared when I originally started racing jet cars. There were like 25 people or something along those lines that were licensed to drive, and now there's like 7. And the guy, when I stopped racing, the guy that trained me crashed. So everyone else is dead. So I don't race anymore.
You still have the Lamborghinis?
The body's sitting in the backyard of the car. I take out once every couple of weeks to the dry lake and play around. It could be a radioactive element. You could use, a proton source could certainly be, they could be using alpha particles for that matter, which is essentially helium nuclei. And there's lots of elements that can do that.
The other part is, on the video we saw, the badge, the letters, one of the letters.